I found references to other Jews involved in Irish republicanism. One was a certain Abraham, his name is Weeks, spelled either W-E-E-K-E-S, or Weeks, W-E-E-K-S, or Wix, W-I-X. Seems to have, it appears in different versions. He was a Jewish socialist from Norwich who came to Dublin with the Cllr brothers and other Liverpool men to participate in the rising. Weeks was accidentally shot on Friday the 28th of April 1918 as the last of the volunteers were making their way to Henry Street. Weeks warranted a citation in a Roll of Honour published in 1924 by the Irish Workers newspaper, a prominent organ of the socialist trade union movement. And it said, A. Weeks, a Jewish comrade who joined on Easter Monday and died in action. Another Jewish sympathizer with republicanism was Abraham Spiro, who managed the Pearl Printing Company in Drury Street, where he printed the IRA newspaper, which I can definitely not pronounce, during the early 1920s. Shapiro also employed Oscar Traynor, the commanding officer of the Dublin IRA, as a compositor at the press. George White, a member of C Company 3rd Battalion Dublin Brigade IRA from 1917 and later Quartermaster Active Service Unit from 1921, he wasn't Jewish, but he recalled in his witness statement that a Jew by the name of Max Cohen lived in a house that was being used as an arms dump at 3 Swifts Row beside Ormond Quay in Dublin city centre. Max knew all about the dump, this is what he wrote, but said nothing about it to the authorities. Max's brother Abraham Cohen, who ran an antique shop at 20 Ormond Quay, told White and another IRA member that they could use his shop any time as a means of escape. A gentleman called Philip Sayers, a Lithuanian-born early Sinn Féiner who was a lifelong sympathizer with the national movement, his Dublin-born son Michael had vivid childhood memories of IRA fugitives being hidden in the house and of politics, and of police raids. A full-length movie called Irish Destiny was released in 1926 to coincide with the 10th anniversary of the Rising. The movie was financed, written and produced by Isaac Jack Eppel, a Jewish GP who ran a pharmacy on Mary Street and who also enjoyed a career as a theatre impresario and cinema owner. This was the first fictional account of the War of Independence and had former members of the IRA amongst its cast members. Kit O'Malley, the one-time adjutant of the Dublin Brigade of the IRA, was military advisor to the production. Set between mid-1920 at the height of the War of Independence and the truce of 1921, the film traces the love affair of IRA volunteer Dennis O'Hara and his fiancée Moira Barry. This firmly populist and pro-Republican movie reflected, of course, Eppel's own political views. Leonard Abramson, not Leonard Abramson who's sitting not 10 feet from me, his grandfather. Leonard Abramson, grandfather of Leonard and David Abramson, was born in 1896 in Odessa, Ukraine, which was then Ukraine and is now Russia, and arrived as a young child in Newry, where his father David opened a garment business. Abramson attended the Abbey School run by the Christian Brothers and scored the highest marks in Ireland for Irish and Greek in the 1910 intermediate certificate. This is a kid who came to this country and had to learn English whatever age he was. He wanted to study medicine, but his family could not afford the fees. So he only got into Trinity in 1912 after winning a prize in Hebrew and Modern Irish, and he was awarded a sizarship in Irish. He switched to medicine and obtained first-class honours in midwifery, surgery and medicine. He was appointed Professor of Pharmacology in the Schools of Surgery in 1922, served as President of the Royal College of Physicians of Ireland, President of the Section of Medicine of the Royal Irish Academy, President of the Biological Society of Trinity College and the College of Surgeons. Leonard Abramson was one of the leaders of the Irish Jewish community, honorary president of the Jewish National Fund, and he helped found the Jewish Representative Council of Ireland. And the reason why Leonard Abramson Sr. features in this talk is because of an incident that took place during his student days at Trinity. It is November 1914. The war is 3 months old, the First World War. The provost of Trinity College, John Pentland Mahaffey, thank you. John Pentland, you would remember how to pronounce his name. John Pentland Mahaffey is very angry because the Dublin Union Gaelic Society has organised the Thomas Davis Centenary Lecture to be delivered by W.B. Yeats. He's not angry with the lecture, he's not angry with the lecturer. He's angry, and he's also not angry that UCD Professor of Economics and Redmondite MP Tom Kettle, a British Army recruiting officer well known for his strong anti-German views, was due to propose the vote of thanks. So why was he angry? He was angry because the Gaelic Society had also invited Irish Republican Patrick Pearse to second the vote of thanks. The provost regarded Pearse as a declared supporter of the anti-recruiting agitation. When the society refused to withdraw the invitation to Pearse, the provost suspended the event. The students retaliated by reconvening in a new venue the following day. And the ringleader of the students, yes, it was Leonard Abramson, the Gaelic Society's honorary librarian, who used to sign his name as MacAbram. So far this evening, we have focused on Irish Jews who were sympathetic to the Republican cause. But not all Irish Jews were so inclined. At the inaugural meeting of the Judeo-Irish Home Rule Association that we looked at earlier, one Irish Jew with unionist sympathies was ejected from the meeting after trying to disrupt proceedings. A fight broke out among at least a dozen people towards the end. The Irish Times on the 11th of September 1908 reported, "It appears that some of the Jews who were not in sympathy with the object of the meeting proclaimed their views rather loudly," don't understand that, "with the result that they were rather roughly treated at the hands of their co-religionists who were supported by a number of United League leaguers." One Jew in Ireland at the time of the rising with understandably anti-Republican views was Sir Matthew Nathan. I say understandably because he was Under Secretary for Ireland. A Jewish Under Secretary for Ireland. In other words, he was a British civil servant. And because his immediate superior, Chief Secretary Augustine Birrell, spent much of his time in London, where he was a member of the cabinet, Nathan was effectively the head of the administration in Ireland in the 2 years before the Easter Rising. His job involved receiving regular reports from the police and military about anti-recruiting and pro-independence activity. Good Friday, 21st of April 1916, after Sir Roger Casement was arrested coming ashore in County Kerry, a mobilisation of the Irish volunteers fixed for Easter Sunday was cancelled on Saturday. On Easter Monday, the 24th of April, Nathan was in his Dublin Castle office when the Easter Rising broke out. He was a virtual prisoner until troops from the Cllr came and rescued him the following day. He remained in the castle all week, keeping the government up to date with the situation and helping to answer questions in Parliament. The rising came to an end on the 30th of April, and that same day, Chief Secretary Birrell and Under Secretary Nathan resigned. Royal Commission on the 1916 rebellion criticised both Birrell and Nathan for failing to take action against the rebels in the weeks and months before the rising. Am I the only person to find it interesting that the Easter Rising coincided with Pesach, Passover, the Jewish celebration of freedom? There had to be many a Jewish family in Ireland in 1916 that drew direct parallels between the Jewish fight for freedom from the Egyptians and the Irish fight for freedom from the British. Earlier, we mentioned that Leonard Abramson and his antics in Trinity. And throughout his studies, Leonard lodged with his friend and fellow student Max Newrock. In 1920, Leonard married Max's sister Tilly. The friendship between Abramson and Newrock survived even though they had opposing views over Irish republicanism. Unlike most of his fellow Jewish students at Trinity, Newrock was anti-republican. A gifted scholar, he entered Dublin's high school in 1904, became editor of the school magazine, the Erasmian. Much of his spare time was taken up with his involvement in the Dublin Tent, that's a branch of the Chovevei Tzion Zionist movement, where he won an essay competition writing about the founder of Zionism, Theodor Herzl. Newrock was the first Jew to win the university studentship of Trinity College, and he was the first senior moderator in classics and philosophy with double large gold medals. After graduating from Trinity, he joined the British Army. And when the Easter Rising erupted, Newrock was visiting Dublin on Passover leave, staying with his parents, William and Rachel, in their South Circular Road home round the corner. Newrock immediately reported to Wellington Barracks for anti-insurrectionary duty. After leaving the army at the end of World War I, Newrock went to Palestine as secretary of the Zionist Commission, headed by Chaim Weizmann. The commission was tasked with carrying out the terms of the 1917 Balfour Declaration, Britain's commitment to give the Jews a national home in Palestine. And for a while there was a second Dublin Jew on the commission, A.J. Con Leventhal, later secretary to both James Joyce and Samuel Beckett. Newrock entered the secretariat of the Palestine government and became assistant private secretary to High Commissioner Herbert Samuel, Britain's first professing Jewish cabinet minister. Of course, Disraeli was really the first, but he wasn't professing. Newrock became a trusted advisor to Samuel, who used to encourage him to sing Irish ballads when they were together. Newrock was also friendly with Samuel's son Edwin, who also worked at the Secretariat. Newrock and Edwin shared the same office, and because they were both Jews, the other members of the Secretariat called their room the Jewish National Home. In the summer of 1921, Newrock was again visiting his parents round the corner in Dublin, in South Circular Road, when three young gunmen burst into the house. Newrock's first thought was, have they come for a tardy reckoning with me on account of my unheroics in 1916? The men ran off when a posse of soldiers arrived on bicycles from Wellington Barracks after being summoned by the Newrock's faithful Catholic maid. Newrock urgently needed to clarify the true purpose of the gunmen. If their visit was to deliver an unofficial warning from the Irish Republican Army, it meant that the Newrock family had been blacklisted and would no longer be safe in Dublin. Newrock turned to a trusted intermediary, none other than Jacob Elian, the De Valera lookalike, to inquire whether the Newrocks had come under some nationalist ban. All afternoon, Newrock and his parents waited in trepidation until finally, the same evening, Elian sent word that the family was not being targeted. In 1933, Newrock became the only Jew to be appointed acting chief secretary to the Palestine government. When Israel gained independence in 1948, he left the British Foreign Service and was among the first civil servants in the infant Jewish state. His last official post was as Israel's ambassador to Australia and New Zealand during the 1950s. A curious incident took place in 1966 at a ceremony in Israel to mark the planting by the Jewish National Fund of the Amon de Valera forest, 10,000 trees in the Galilee. De Valera could not attend the ceremony, so he asked the honorary president of the Jewish National Fund in Ireland, Leonard Abramson, to recommend someone as de Valera's official personal representative. Leonard thought hard and long and then recommended his son Muff, father of David and Leonard. Israel's Prime Minister Levi Eshkol could also not attend the tree planting ceremony. He too sent his own personal representative, former diplomat Max Newrock. At the ceremony, Newrock read a message from Eshkol stating that he saw in the planting a fitting expression of the traditional friendship between Ireland and Israel, which have so much in common. After the ceremony, de Valera's representative approached Eshkol's representative. "Hello, uncle," said Muff Abramson. "Hello, nephew," replied Newrock. Ladies and gentlemen, we've seen this evening that 100 years ago, many, if not most, Irish Jews were fiercely pro-Republican. And we also know that Irish Jews at the time were per capita among the most fiercely Zionist Jews in the world. Most Jews in Ireland saw distinct parallels between republicanism and Zionism. After all, Theodor Herzl, the founder of modern Zionism, had proclaimed his wish to be the Parnell of the Jews. Why then did Irish republicanism, by and large, not return the compliment? We know that several leading Republican figures held anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist views. And as we saw with David Marcus's Witch on the Train, there has been no shortage of people in Ireland who combine being both pro-IRA and being anti-Semitic. In modern-day Ireland, Sinn Féin displays a hysterical hatred of the Jewish state. Individuals, Sinn Féin spokespeople, regularly resort to Nazi-style demonology when describing Jewish TDs, the Israeli ambassador, and others. As that well-known expert in human rights, Angus or Snoddy, said in 2006, "Israel is without doubt one of the most abhorrent and despicable regimes on the planet." Personally, I take that as a compliment. Cathal King, the unsuccessful Sinn Féin candidate in the recent Dublin Southwest by-election, is on record as saying, "My hatred for these Israeli subhumans is growing by the day, and I rarely use the word hate without very serious consideration." I shudder to think what pro-Republican Irish Jews like Robert Briscoe, Fanny Marcus, Jacob Elian, Estella Solomons and Michael Noyk would make of the modern guardians of Irish republicanism. Thank you very much.
Ireland supported the fight for Zionism up to at the time that they were fighting the British in Israel.
In Palestine, yeah.
That was the big thing. They supported anybody who was fighting the British. The unfortunate thing for me, and I have very fond memories, and I love this country very, very much, but I have to admit that there is an underlying stream, and has been for a long time, of anti-Semitism. My father was a backbench member of the Irish government, could not get a visa for his aunt who lived in Berlin, and eventually she went to Auschwitz. he never talked to me about this. I think he was totally ashamed of it.
But it's all in the documents, isn't it? We've seen the letters.
Yeah, well, it's coming out now.
Yeah.
My father didn't like driving. I used to drive Dad all over the place. And after the war, after the camps had been discovered, after all this business, when you would imagine there would be a little bit of sympathy, my father was considered Peter Berry, who was the Secretary General of the Department of Justice, as a great personal friend. And he used to go there and he was saying, I'm doing my best to get... My father was just looking to see if they could get even a half a dozen people, survivors, to be given residency here. And it was only long afterwards, when Peter Berry's papers were published. And it's a terrible thing to say, but you know, I was glad my father was not alive, because he was being so fooled by this man. And this happened all along. I have no doubt whatsoever, that De Valera was not anti-Semitic. I think that if De Valera had had his way, my father would have been in the cabinet. In fact, certain private information, he wanted Dad to be Minister for Local Government. But the people within the cabinet did not want it.
Thank you. Another question, please.
Thank you. I can tell you how Gerald got to be Lord Mayor, because I saw it all happen. He went for the council as an independent, and he got in as alderman, I think, on the first time. And he worked like mad. He worked very hard as a solicitor, doing crime, and as a councillor. And even then, he was never going to be Lord Mayor as an independent. They were never going to make him a Lord Mayor as independent. So he joined Fianna Fáil, and even then Fianna Fáil was saying, oh, well, if we take him in and make him Lord Mayor, he'll want to be a TD as well. I mean, Gerald was like in his 70s at this stage. I think he said, my wife would divorce me. so that's how he got to be his term as Lord Mayor, but it was by hard work. You know, it didn't just come, and it was in the teeth of sort of apathy as well.
There's an interesting...
It wouldn't, I mean, for nobody does it just roll in. Because
no, and there's a very sad and interesting story about Sir Otto Jaffe, who was Lord Mayor of Belfast, that in 1914, when the war broke out, even though he had been in Northern Ireland, I think by that time, 50 years, was one of the wealthiest philanthropists in Northern Ireland, half of Queen's came from his money, and hospitals and everything else, because he had come from Germany, and because of the hysterical anti-German atmosphere immediately after the outbreak of World War I, he was hounded out the country, and he never returned. It was as bad as that. It was terrible. That's not an answer to your question, Mark, but it is a fact that there are pockets, and sometimes influential pockets, of anti-Semitism that have certainly not made life always easy, and yet most of the people I've ever spoken to when I was working on the book and interviewing lots and lots of people of a certain age in this country, most Irish Jews will tell you that they personally never experienced anti-Semitism. Now, I'm only quoting them. I'm not making a statement of fact. Some people would argue with that. Other people would back it up. So it's a dicey one.
I mean, I suppose it should be said in fairness that two other members of the Jewish community, Mervyn Taylor and Alan Chatter, did go on to be cabinet ministers, and I think they were the only other Jewish TDs. I'm not too sure about that. Just one comment and one question. I was talking to somebody in the office there the other day, and something came up in the discussion about what's happening in Israel and Palestine and all that. And I said to him, you know, am I the only Labour Party person who supports Israel? And what he said to me was, no, actually I do as well. And I actually think there's a whole, there's a battle to be won, and I don't mean a physical battle, there's a battle to be won. I mean, I think some of the things that the Israel government did in Gaza were appalling, but that's a government doing appalling things. But there is a natural tendency by the nationalist movement, and I don't consider Sinn Féin to be a Republican party at all in the proper meaning of that word. They're a narrow nationalist, fascist party in my view. They have adopted this pro-Palestinian thing, and they have managed to persuade an awful lot of people that the Palestinian cause is the only just one. And I think it's not an issue I'm heavily involved in, but I think those of you who are more on that side of that issue, I think need to get out there and persuade the people more. But the question I want to ask, because I've always been struck by this, that all of the speakers you spoke about, or all of the people you spoke about, adopted the anti-treaty side in the time of the Civil War. And I'm just wondering, was there any, and I don't even know if you can answer this, was there any significance to that? Was it to do with the fact that a lot of the people on the pro-treaty side, they were predated by Arthur Griffith and some of his dodgy views, and they were succeeded by the blue shirts and some of their dodgy views? Was that a natural tendency? Or
I don't know, but Michael Collins himself, we know, had very good relations with many Jews, including, of course, his blessed Jew man, which was Briscoe, and then they worked very closely together. But I'd actually never thought of that, and that may well explain part of why once there was this division between pro and anti, why many Jews would have been more suspicious, possibly, of the pro-treaty than of the anti-treaty. That's an interesting, very interesting.
On one side.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think there's some research to be done there. Thank you very much.